Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ali Rafi. Dan Haley is the Chief Legal Officer of Flock Safety. Dan spent nearly a decade in big law before moving in-house, where he's helped legal teams through moments of hypergrowth, major acquisitions, IPOs, and periods of real uncertainty. We talked about the ups and downs of going in-house, navigating a major takeover at his first operating role, guiding Sprinklr through its IPO and the pandemic, and the legal and constitutional questions around public safety technology, including the Fourth Amendment and privacy as it relates to flock safety. We also talk about career trajectory more broadly and why Dan believes working hard, building connections, and being a little spontaneous can actually lead to greater career growth than overly planning. We hope you enjoy the episode. Dan Haley, CLO of Flock Safety, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How's Boston this time of year?
Well, my background isn't fake, so you can see it. It's got 2 feet of snow on the ground, and ordinarily I'd love that, but on December 19th, a huge pine tree came down on a windstorm and blew a hole the size of a Volkswagen in my roof. So this winter's been a challenge.
Sorry to hear that.
It's great. No complaints.
That's crazy. I'm really sorry to hear that. I guess before we get into your career, let's start with a quick icebreaker. You've obviously been a career lawyer with a ton of success. I'm curious, if you were not in the legal industry, what's a career or another hobby that you'd be pursuing?
Gosh, well, those are different questions. You'd asked me career, 10 years ago, I would have said politics for sure, government and politics. I wouldn't say that anymore. It's too toxic. Nobody engages with each other anymore. And I've gone from being a political animal to being utterly and totally disengaged from it. My ego wants to say that I would do something quieter and with my hands. But that would be a fantasy land because I have no skill with my hands and I can't grow anything. I can't build anything. I suppose I'd go back in time and be a photographer. I really enjoy photography and videography.
Love it. But yeah, Getty Images, I don't know how much longer they're going to be around with AI.
My 18-year-old daughter is right now applying to art schools and quite stressed out about what that means, but she's always wanted to do it. So, here we go. She'll figure it out. Get to be part of the transition.
Love it. Awesome, Dan. Well, we'd love to get into your career. It's awesome to be speaking with you. Obviously, Chief Legal Officer of Flock Safety. Congrats on 7 months there.
Thanks.
But you started out, you went to Harvard Law School. So I'm curious, when you were at Harvard, what were you thinking? Because you immediately went into politics, if I'm not mistaken. So were you looking to become a politician?
Yeah. Well, I the first 10 years of my career, I went back and forth between politics and big law. And a lot of that time was spent, if I'm honest, a lot of that time was spent being paid by big law, but moonlighting in government and politics. So, at the time I thought, what a lot of law students think, I'll go to a big law firm until I pay off my debt. And then I committed the very common sin of just adopting a lifestyle, incurring a whole bunch more debt instead of paying off my debt, got very used to the golden handcuffs. And before I knew it, 10 years had gone by. I'd spent 5 years each at Goodwin Procter and McDermott Will and Emery. Had some great experiences at both, but never thought, a decade of my life would be spent at big law. Wasn't for me.
I hear a hint of a little bit of negativity. So could you expand on that? Because I feel like a lot of people follow your path where they go into big law and they go into industry. So yeah, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, the reason I ended that with it wasn't for me is I have a lot of friends. My first firm was Goodwin, and I have a lot of friends who are still at Goodwin. I have a lot of friends who were with me at Goodwin who have gone on to great careers at other firms, and it is for them. They love it. They're engaged, by the paradigm, by the notion that, no one matter lasts forever. And so it's sort of a self-renewing career all the time. And that's awesome. It just wasn't for me. When I was starting to toy with the notion of not being a big firm litigator anymore. I remember very clearly going out to dinner with a very senior partner who was creeping up on retirement. And we went out to dinner with a client who was a friend of his. And the client asked him, Mike, are either your kids thinking about law school? And he said, we have one rule in my house. Nobody's allowed to consider law school. And we all sort of laughed uncomfortably. And then, leaving, I said, was that true about the kids? And he just looked at me and said, selling your time is no way to live a life. And to me, that was just like tragic. Like he was at the pinnacle of, I mean, he was a really great lawyer, really renowned, and at the end of a storied career. And he was clearly looking back, just saying like, yeah, I sold my life in hourly increments and I shouldn't have done that. That resonated with me. And shortly thereafter, I left, but not because of that. On the other hand, like I said, some of the happiest people I know are big firm lawyers just killing it. So it's different for everybody.
That makes total sense. And it's interesting because it feels like we might be at an inflection point where the billable hour might go away. Have you heard anything about that?
I love that you just said that. And the reason it made me burst out laughing is that inflection point has been happening on and off for as long as I've been practicing law. And I've been practicing law since, before, what I call leash technology, these things existed back when, you would go home on a Friday and come back on Monday and there'd be a pile of faxes on the desk that would tell you, what your clients were up to over the weekend. Back then it was, oh gosh, we're going into alternative billing models and the billable hour is dead and all these things, and it never lasts. I personally think the billable hour is the least bad way to pay lawyers. And I don't see it going away anytime soon, but that'll only be true till it's true.
Interesting. It just like makes me think about how many other things like with AI, with I guess the internet back in the day were just hype and didn't have any merit, because that it feels like that is like a conversation or topic that I'm always hearing about.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's weird to me. I constantly preface things by saying things like, back in my day or whatever. I don't know when I became old and able to say things like that with a straight face, but I would challenge what you just said in the following way. All of those things you just mentioned, they did change everything. They just didn't change everything in the way that necessarily everybody expected them to. So the internet absolutely fundamentally changed the economy and the way law was practiced, just not in the way people expected it to. And AI, I don't know. I'm a skeptic of the notion that everyone should rush to shove as much AI into their workflows as possible. And I've got this idea kicking around in my head of writing something about the concept of fake it till you make it. That's a development thing. Like you get a great stretch opportunity and you learn along the way. And the working title of this is, with AI, it's fake it but never make it, because AI enables you to, write the memo, give the answer, but you don't learn the thing. And so you don't develop the expertise. And so for lawyers, that's particularly dangerous because at the end of the day, people want a lawyer to be a trusted advisor. You want to be able to answer questions in the moment. You want to be able to contribute to conversations about sticky issues. And if you can't do that without consulting, Chatty, your utility is going to be limited.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. It does seem like schools are pretty split. Like my school, it seems like they stay really far away from making sure like you're, like you said, you're learning and not using AI whatsoever. But I've talked to folks at other schools where it's encouraged, it's part of the curriculum, you're learning how to use these tools early. So we'll see how things turn out. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Well, I could be wrong. I could be right, but it's my perspective.
Yeah. Sounds good. Dan, and you said you were a litigator. So I'm curious, what kind of matters did you work on?
Yeah. This might color my previous answer, but my experience at Big Law, at Goodwin, I primarily ended up working in products liability suits, which back in the day were just soul crushing. They were, it was all about document production. It was all about, crushing the other side with discovery requests. And the mechanism of that crushing was forcing young associates like myself to spend weeks upon weeks in what were literally, called document rooms, but they weren't virtual. They were conference rooms that would be literally lined with stacks of boxes that we would, here I go with the old man stuff again, but that we would have to go through one by one, and we would have to label them, with a number, with a Bates number. That wasn't automatic; that was a sticker, and then also, redact them and flag them with endless color coded flags. So it was kind of a nightmare, and that's part of what I think chased me away. And then later in my career, after spending some time in state government in Massachusetts at McDermott, I had a nice hybrid of kind of high profile white collar criminal defense and lobbying. We called it government strategies, but it was government advocacy. It was lobbying, and I enjoyed that a lot more. It was much more dynamic, much more kind of in the lane of what I was interested in back then. So I spent 5 years doing that, and that was formative.
Yeah. And so 4 years at Goodwin, and I did see you worked in the government. You worked at the DA's office. And did you do that to intentionally to make that pivot to try to go into a practice group you'd be more interested in?
No, and this is I don't know, a point I always find myself making at some point in career retrospective conversations. Um, I've never had a career plan. Uh,
Really?
yeah, and I've very honestly, I've never had a plan for my next step. And I frequently say to teammates, team members, my direct reports, the folks who work for me, um, at some point along the line, law students and young lawyers started being told, you should know what your next step is and the one after that. And you should be constantly, gearing your day to day toward reaching that next step or that next rung on the ladder or whatever. Um, I fundamentally resist that notion based on my own experience. I've never done that. And all of my opportunities have come unexpectedly and they've come out of left field. So the line I always use is, if you're constantly focused on what you think your next step is, you're blocking your peripheral vision, and you're limiting yourself to that tiny slice of the world that you're aware of and think you want. But 99.9 ad infinitum percent of the world is happening outside of your awareness at any given time. Most of your opportunities are going to come from there if you're open to them. And so, I don't know. I always hasten to say, a lot of my friends have great careers that they've built very, very deliberately and mindfully. I've got what I've think of as a very enjoyable, challenging career that I've built with, kind of utter disregard for planning. And I've
Yeah.
been, so
That's really an interesting perspective, which I really like and respect, because I do feel like you do hear the advice about being deliberate about your career, especially early on.
yeah,
But it just sounds like I don't know. It sounds like if you do good work and you're passionate, those opportunities will come organically.
this is, thank you for saying that. You just anticipated what I was about to add, which is there's a difference between being passive and being open to opportunity. I don't think the lack of plan that I just laid out works if you're just dialing it in whatever you're doing now. You've got to excel. You've got to do a really good job so that people with opportunities that they might want to make available to you want to reach out. And that's working real hard. It's achieving great results, but it's also, being attentive to networking and being a good person, being a good colleague, someone who the people you bounce off of think, oh, I would like to bounce off of that person again, or maybe even spend some part of my career working with them.
Yeah. I love that take. And just kind of reflecting, like, I've interviewed now, I think 30 people. And I think one thing that's really stuck out to me is like, most of the time, folks are not applying to new roles or like intentionally lateraling. It's like almost always someone they used to work with, a former boss, former employee that's like, hey, let's grab lunch. I want to tell you about this role. And I
That's
think that's like really struck me.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that, that only comes from the combination of doing great work and being attentive to, making a favorable impression on the people you interact with.
Love to hear it. It's interesting, Dan. I saw in one of your blog posts, you talk about hiring people who want your job and are capable of doing it eventually. Can you
Yeah.
say more about that?
Yeah. And thanks for reading my blog posts. I always wonder if anybody reads them. Um, yeah, I think if I remember that one correctly, I said something along the lines of, there's a million different cliches that attach to that concept, like hire people who are smarter than you. Uh, A players hire A plus players and B players hire C players. No matter what it is, the point is, uh, if in your professional capacity, building a team and managing people is part of your job, you will do better if your team does better, and your team will do better if you hire people who are superlative. And don't worry about, like, is this person smarter than me? Are they going to take? Are they going to eventually want to take my job? I love that. And in fact, I've hired multiple people who have literally taken my job. Um, at Athena Health, the current GC succeeded me, and she's still there almost 10 years later. And at Sprinklr, the current GC worked for me at Athena Health and then at Sprinklr, and took my job. And that's awesome. I'm so proud of him, and I'm so proud of her. Um, that's the way it's supposed to. That's the way it's supposed to work. And by the way, they're both smarter than me, and they know it.
Yeah, I think as I was looking at your LinkedIn, like you're saying, like you maintain those relationships, and even though you're at Flock, you're still reposting job posts at Sprinkler. You're saying it's an amazing team to work with. So I think that's something that really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's it's. I think of those things as like they're the easiest things in the world to do. It takes no time at all to pass along a job post for someone in your network, or to flag a job post to someone in your network and say, I think you'd really like this person. It takes no time at all, but it's really valuable, and it creates loyalty. It creates uh, it generates those opportunities that you referenced before, where down the road somebody reaches out to you because you did them a solid and they see something that might be interesting to you.
Yeah, love to hear it. Okay, Dan. So I want to talk about your transition from big law to in-house. So almost 6 years at McDermott,
Yeah.
and then you went to Athena Health.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, yeah, how did the opportunity come up?
Yeah. Very much out of left field. I was doing outside lobbying work at McDermott for Athena Health, and it was, I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. Well, more time passes, the more all of us exaggerate our stories. So maybe I am, but I don't think so. I had just turned 40, and I remember very clearly walking the dog with my then wife and saying, uh, I did not intend to spend 10 years of my life at big law firms. And now I think I'm stuck. I think I might have spent too much time and now it's just, the path of least resistance is to just stay. And this is where the exaggeration maybe comes in. In my head, it was just a couple days later. Maybe it was a couple weeks, but it was quick. I got a call from a guy at Athena Health, and he said, "Hey, we're building out a federal affairs program, and we need someone to lead it. Could you let me know if you know anyone?" And I said, "Sure. Let me give some thought." I hung up the phone, and then I immediately called him back and said, "I know someone. It's me. I should, I should be the person." Um, and that was, I thought I was not only leaving big law, I thought I was going to stop being a practicing lawyer. I thought, okay, now I'm going to be a government affairs person. That's going to be my jam. And it was for a short period of time. It happened that at Athena Health, the government affairs team sat under the general counsel. The CEO then of Athena Health was a guy named Jonathan Bush, who is cousin to George W. Bush and nephew to George H.W. Bush. He's also a complete madman. Not at all what people think of as the Bushes, but so he was really engaged on the government affairs stuff. So I got to know him really well. We got to trust each other. And so when the GC went on sabbatical a few years later, Jonathan said, "Hey, would you be acting GC?" And he said at the time, if you're going to do this, do it as though it's your job. Like, don't just be a placeholder for 6 months. And so I did. And ultimately, the GC, who's a great guy, who I really liked working for, decided not to come back. And all of a sudden, I was general counsel of a $1 billion revenue publicly traded company. And back to the fake it till you make it thing, I had no business being general counsel of a publicly traded company. But Jonathan did me a tremendous solid by trusting me with a reach opportunity, and I've never looked back. I've loved being a GC and a CLO since then.
Wow. That's pretty insane because a lot of people go to these big law firms in hopes of becoming a public company GC or CLO.
Yeah, I was
And
lucky.
from the way you're describing it, it does kind of sound like not that it fell in your lap, but it was like not your intention.
No, I mean this is the thing. I mean, I've this is why I say I don't know. Not planning really worked for me. Athena was a spectacular opportunity. I experienced more at that place than a lot of people do in a whole career, and that was it wasn't luck because again, I put myself in a position to be uh, offered those things, but it was luck in some ways.
You made your own luck.
Well, yeah,
Dan, at risk of asking kind of a shallow question, like, obviously everyone knows when you're in big law for the amount of time you were in, you're making a substantial amount of money. So how were you thinking about making that pivot? I mean, I don't know if you're making more or less, but a lot of people talk about how going in-house, you take a cut. So I'm curious what your thinking was around that.
yeah, without a doubt. And look, it's this is maybe where my lack of planning, doesn't look as brilliant. But I often observe that I've taken a pay cut for every job I've taken since leaving McDermott. And that's not literally true because I keep going to earlier stage companies because what I really enjoy is building a team. But at each of them, I get paid a little less cash and a little more equity. And the equity thing it's a dice roll. As a friend of mine said to me the very first time I got paid in equity at Athena Health, don't treat that like money. That is not money until it is cash in your pocket. Until then, it's imaginary. So live your life accordingly. And that was really good advice. But to answer your question directly, yeah, when I went to Athena Health, I took a pretty substantial pay cut in terms of take home pay. And I got a good slug of equity in a company that ended up being very valuable eventually. And that turned out to be a great career move. But sometimes people do it and it never pays off. And hopefully it's a great career move in other ways.
Yeah. Love to hear it. Yeah, I think equity, it's like fascinating because I worked in the tech industry and everyone like knows about equity and that's kind of like where there can be a potentially huge payout. But in the legal industry, it's like not talked about as much unless you go in house, of course. But it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
So awesome. So 7 years at Athena Health. And so can you talk about the growth there? Like how big was the legal team when you joined? How big was it when you left?
Yeah. I'm going to use rough numbers, but it was less than 10 when I joined. And by the time I left, it was 30 some odd lawyers and support staff. And the company, the company blew up while I was there. And then it plateaued and then it was taken private by Elliott Management, which is kind of the biggest, baddest activist investor out there. And that was a brutal experience. Um, I always hesitate to say this because I think people think I'm being trite, but I'm not. I'm just being honest. Like it was the worst experience of my life, stress wise, and I've had cancer twice, so I don't say that lightly. Um, but it was also the period of time that I learned the most, and so I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't go through it again willingly, but I wouldn't trade it either. It was Athena was a fantastic experience in all ways. Met some of the best people I know in the world. I still work with several of them. I've been lucky that they've come with me from company to company. Um, and yeah, that was very formative for me.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I mean, can you share maybe a specific example or two of why that was such a tough experience?
Yeah. So when an activist gets in your stock, and you Google them, it's like, my then boss Jonathan said, it's like when you have something in your arm and you take a picture and you show the internet and it says, "Oh, that's cancer. You're gonna die." Like always. um, you Google Elliott Management and it says you are really in big trouble. They're gonna get what they want. You might as well just give them what they want, and their tactics are brutal. And you read stories about them, hiring mercenaries to take over a ship in international waters when they targeted a company back when, and all these things. Is wild. And it turns out that's more or less true. Like they are relentless, incredibly smart people. Like they came at us with a theory about the company that was really well thought out and had a lot of truth in it. But what they wanted was, to remove our founder CEO. And 18 months later, that's what they got. And they got it, ultimately, via, tactics that they claim it wasn't them, but of course it was. And it was like, they got somebody to go into his sealed divorce records and find a really nasty story, and they leaked it to a tabloid in London. And that was kind of the last straw. And it was wild. It was
Wow.
like something out of a TV show for sure.
Wow. Yeah, I guess yeah, that's pretty insane. I obviously learning about M&A transactions and hostile takeovers, and I guess they really are hostile.
Yeah, yeah, they are. That the notion of like people combing through people's garbage and stuff like that. It's real. It happens. It's not paranoid.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I mean, it's you've kind of been in the SaaS industry. I don't know if Flock is a SaaS or as much as a hardware, or both, I guess. But
Both.
okay, cool. So and then you went to Sprinklr for and did you move to New York from Massachusetts?
And I did
Okay.
the train commuting thing. In Boston, you can get on a train and be in Penn Station in Manhattan in less than 4 hours. And so for 7 months of my life, I got up every Monday morning, crack of dawn, got on a train, spent 3 nights in Manhattan, and then came home on Thursday evening. And that was awesome for a while. It was like a great adventure. And then it turned into sort of a slog, and then it turned into sort of a misery. And then the universe dropped a global pandemic on us, and that stopped. And I became a remote worker. So, silver linings and everything.
Wow, that's pretty wild. I mean, that is a hell of a commute and kind of staying there overnight and stuff like that. There's a lot of people I hear about in the Bay Area and LA that make that flight, and some people that do it every day. So this like this super commuter era is really something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't do that.
And so yeah, so those 3 years, 7 months at Sprinklr, and I'm curious. Yeah, obviously you saw it through IPO. Like, what was building a team there like?
That was fantastic. It was a totally different challenge from Athena, because Athena was the entire team was based in Watertown, Massachusetts. We all went to work together in our legal pod every day. We were like family. We knew each other's families. Still, know each other, know each other's families. And Sprinklr was a global workforce, like every continent, dozens and dozens of countries. And the legal team, every single person I was interacting with every day, even though I was in the corporate headquarters in New York most of the week, every week, I was interacting like this. And it seems crazy now, but wasn't that long ago. This was new. Like this was not the way people actually interacted. And so building a team across cultures and time zones and borders that still had some elements of that, like I care about you, you care about me, we've got each other's backs, we know each other, was an interesting challenge. And we actually, we came up with, things that are kind of they're almost trite now, but back then they were doing innovative, like virtual happy hours, sharing photographs, playing goofy games, and geared toward getting people to open up about their lives. And the payoff of all of that was when we had our first legal team meeting all together, and people just gathered in a bar and were just giving each other huge hugs, and it just felt so strange that none of us had ever met in person because it seemed like we knew each other so well. That was a cool experience, and the IPO thing was great. I mean, people treat that in general counsel circles. People treat that like it's a you either have it or you don't have it. It's like it's almost like a tattoo. um,
Really?
yeah, which I think is silly because at the end of the day, an IPO is just a transaction, and the next day you keep doing your job, and it's managed like any other transaction. Outside counsel does most of the work. Um, but it is a thing. You'll almost always be asked in interviews for a GC position if you've taken a company public, and I always say no, and neither has any other GC. I've supported the taking a company public, but you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I just reflecting on like your what you said about meeting up at the bar after COVID. It's I also experienced that. It's like just seeing everyone. It's like, oh, you're taller than I expected, or whatever the
that's
case
always
might
the
be.
line, right?
Yeah,
Oh, you're taller than I expected.
yeah,
Because nobody is going to say you're shorter than I expected.
totally, totally. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy. Like I was just reading about Sprinkler's growth during COVID and like how explosive it was. And I mean that I don't know. It's I know you keep saying that it was a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time, a little bit of luck, but it's just amazing to see like sort of the companies you've worked at and how much explosive growth they've experienced with you at the lead.
Well, that is definitely luck, and they're like that's correlation, not causation, for sure. I have been very lucky. Yeah, I've been very lucky, and I've had my share of the opposite ride. Athena plateaued. We ended up being taken private. Um, you know, uh, I joined Guild in the very first day of my tenure, like literally the first day of my tenure. I sat in an executive team meeting and was told we're planning for a reduction in force, which by the way is the worst. Like I, it's the worst. It's I love building teams. The absolute worst part about being an executive is occasionally having to say to somebody, "Your job is going away, and it's not your fault. You've done a great job, but we no longer need you." That stinks. Um, but it's sometimes necessary. So it's part of the gig.
And that was the first day at Guild that you heard about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how was the growth at Guild? I mean, so yeah, was there did it kind of go down and then go back up, or how did
Yeah.
that?
I mean, look, it's important to say about that reduction in force. It wasn't because anyone was holding a gun to the company's head and saying, investors, board, or whatever. It was because the company had grown really, really fast, and the management team, looking at the headcount numbers as compared to revenue numbers, just recognized we employ too many people for the size of the business. Like we grew too much. And that is something that if you don't do it deliberately, you will get to a place where you have to do it quickly and violently and messily. And so it takes a lot of fortitude to say, to recognize that and act on it. So I can't say I was glad to be part of that process because it's miserable, but it was the right thing for the business at the time. And afterwards, the growth reaccelerated. Guild is interesting because they sell a thing that uh, it's a education benefit platform for primarily for blue collar workers. And that was a thing that during the war for talent period a couple of years ago was like every company had to have it. It was a must have. And now with a tighter labor market and no war for talent, it's just less of an imperative for companies. And so, their growth is more difficult, but they're still killing it. And I still have a number of really good friends there, and they provide a service that is life changing for a lot of people who, otherwise wouldn't have access to opportunity. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love to hear it. Dan, before we get to Flock, I want to ask you, you've probably worked with a lot of outside counsel. So I'm
Yeah.
curious about like how do you go about maintaining these relationships? Who do you decide? How do you decide who to work with? Because you've obviously been in house for quite a while.
Yeah. So I'm going to say a harsh thing and then a less harsh, but maybe obvious thing. I don't have any outside counsel loyalty, meaning I'm not loyal to a firm. I don't get, entrenched with the notion that, well, I use this firm because I've always used this firm, or I use this firm because I used to work there. I think particularly having been on the outside counsel side of things, I'm very acutely aware that if you give a firm repeated work too much, they'll take you for granted, and the proactive energy will just, it won't be there. It'll be, well, they're a client. We don't have to spend a ton of time keeping them developed and happy. You become passive. And so I don't, I change outside counsel frequently. And that said, I do have a lot of personal loyalty. So when I find an outside counsel who, and I have a number of them in my roster who,
I can imagine.
they're good people, they're smart, they're attentive, uh, business oriented, and what I mean by that is, it's a superpower in a lawyer to be able to understand what the business imperative is behind the legal question and solve for that, not just go after the answer to the legal question. And you'd be surprised. It's a I wouldn't say it's a tiny percentage, but it's a small percentage who really have that ability to get in the weeds, figure out your business and what you're trying to solve for from a macro perspective, and then apply that filter to all the legal questions that they're handling for you. Um, so yeah, I when I find those people, I tend to follow them. If they move firms, I take that work and move it to their new firm because as an individual, I trust them.
Yeah. It's really good advice, I think. Not necessarily firm loyal, but it's all about personal relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's great advice. Cool, Dan. Well, let's talk about flock safety.
Yeah.
I think it goes without saying that there's a lot of controversy around flock safety,
Yeah.
probably more so than Guild and Sprinklr. So I did read briefly about some of the reasons you joined and why it means so much to you, but I'm curious in your own words, like why does this company mean so much to you?
Yeah. Well, I genuinely love what we do, and I love the founding proposition of the company. It's why I joined. I had 3 hours of conversation, kind of get to know you conversations with Garrett Langley, the CEO, who, by the way, was introduced to me by one of those outside counsel who I was just talking about. Um,
Wow.
yeah, she said, "I've got this CEO who you will really like, and the company's really interesting. You should just meet." And so we did, and we talked for about an hour. And he said, "Can we grab another hour?" And we talked for another hour. And he said, "Can we grab another hour?" And I said, "Am I being interviewed?" And he said, "Yes." um, and but anyway, what we talked about primarily was um, the reason he founded the company, and it was this realization that um, law enforcement lacked cutting edge tools to solve crime, and those tools existed in the world. So the thing that Garrett seized on was uh, most crimes are committed in one way or another using a vehicle. And if you are lucky enough, it's like the proverbial thing that happens in the TV show, like, did you get the plate? And if you get the plate, then wow, it's pretty easy to find the person who was driving off in that car. And if you didn't get the plate, you're kind of screwed, and you're probably not going to find that person. Um, and Garrett realized, well, that's a thing I can build. Like, I can build a camera that gets the plate, and I can connect it to technology that analyzes images and figures out patterns and solves crime. Makes it just easier to solve crime. But it also occurred to him, well, gosh, that could be really invasive, and people could have a problem with that. And so his dual principle in founding the company was, um, law enforcement should have access to cutting edge tools to solve crimes and make communities safer, but those tools should be engineered and deployed in a way that respect civil liberties. And so what he built into the product was transparency and accountability. So um, every time the Flock network is queried, it creates a permanent and immutable audit log of that interaction. So you can't use it secretly. You can't use it without a reason. A cop can't, the thing people always ask me about is, couldn't a cop use it to stalk their ex-wife? For some reason, that's the paradigm that people always come up with. And that happens. It's rare, but it happens. And when it happens, the audit log shows it, and those people get fired, and sometimes they get prosecuted. And, Garrett didn't have to build that into the platform, but it was important to build it into the platform because it's really powerful technology. It could be abused. The way we've engineered it, it literally, if it's abused, the proof of that abuse, the evidence for that abuse is right there, and you can't not generate it, and you can't delete it. I often say, when people say, well, gosh, this technology could be abused, I ask, what piece of equipment do we give law enforcement that can't be abused? A uniform, a badge, a gun, a police cruiser. All of them can be misused, can be abused, can be used coercively, can be used to violate people's rights. The difference between all of those tools and equipment and Flock is none of those tools create a record of the use. All of them can be abused in secret. Flock can't. I think that is why, generally speaking, despite the controversy, when we're able to engage with critics and talk with them and show them the way the platform is engineered, communities tend to decide, okay, that's a fair trade. The outcomes that the technology achieves are worth the risk of abuse or invasion of privacy, because if that happens, we'll be able to hold people accountable for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate the overview. First of all, it's clear you're passionate about the product. Second, you guys have been so thoughtful about how you've built this thing, about the website. You have the whole FAQ section, the privacy terms and conditions are super clear. It's not like Apple terms and conditions or something like that. And in reference to some of the examples, like you said, of like the cop stalking the ex and some of these other things, for every one of those examples, we've seen so many examples of positive impact on the community. I think like the most recent ones that stand out to me is like Providence, Rhode Island, with the Reddit tip where the Flock cameras were able to track down the shooter.
Yeah.
And another example, close to me, because I'm in Berkeley, Oakland, where I think they just passed a resolution to install, I think it was almost 300 cameras because of the improvements they've been seeing to community safety. And it's even been endorsed by the NAACP to show that it, reduces crime and even helps with less profiling. So I'll pause there, get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, you just said it all, and I appreciate it. Providence was just it couldn't have been a more perfect use case, and the mayor and the police chief have been very clear that without Flock, they wouldn't have found the guy. And as it turned out, he was dead in a storage facility in New Hampshire. But imagine if we didn't know that. And all of those communities in New England thought there was just this guy who had murdered a bunch of people in two separate communities. He was just still out there. Oakland was a wonderful demonstration of exactly what you just flagged. Most of the people who came out to support Flock at the city council in Oakland came from minority communities, came from impoverished communities that have been made safer by this technology. I always hasten to add, using this technology or not using this technology is a community choice. And the parameters that are built around the use of the technology, for example, whether the information can be shared outside of a community. Some communities decide, no, We want our data to stay in our community, be used only for crimes in our community. Others literally make the polar opposite decision, and they opt into something called national sharing, which means any other user on the Flock network can query their cameras nationwide. That's up to the community. Um, my thing is just, if the community is going to make that decision, it should make it based on the facts, and the facts are knowable. In this particular political moment, I completely understand why people are hypersensitive to the intersection between federal law enforcement and local law enforcement. The ICE situation, I don't know your politics, you don't know my politics, but gosh, it would be hard to argue that people have no right to be concerned about some of the dynamics in play in this country right now. And so folks frequently say, I am concerned that ICE is using Flock's network to track people down. That is a factual assertion, and it's false. They are not. ICE does not have a contract with Flock. They do not have access to our cameras. And in communities, in cities and states that prohibit cooperation with federal law enforcement, they're not able to get any information out of law enforcement. And so, again, that's a community choice, but it's tool agnostic. People will sometimes say, protesters will say, that their city council should cancel their Flock contract to send a message to the Trump administration. And I understand that impulse. Canceling a Flock contract sends no message to the Trump administration. The Trump administration does not care if your community has a contract with Flock any more than it cares what I had for breakfast. It's like me saying I'm going to have eggs this morning to send a message to the Trump administration. It's totally ineffectual. But it sort of comes back to my, gosh, have the conversation, engage on the facts, and then make the decision. There's all sorts of reasons for communities to do or not do a thing. It's just, as public officials, in my view, have an obligation to make those decisions based on facts, not hyperbole.
Yeah, 100%. And just as a counter, to what you said, as an example of what you said, like Richmond, the city of Richmond, they got rid of their system,
Mm-hmm.
and that was because they had the national search feature turned on.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it's up to each community. So Richmond may not have wanted that; their police chief eliminated it.
Yep.
And it's just it depends on who you're voting for. Really, it sounds like in the
Oh, that's
community.
right. That's right. And that's, again, that's how it is supposed to work. But I also, your audience is law students, I assume. So Fourth Amendment questions are probably of interest. And one of the things we hear frequently is people have concerns that Flock violates their Fourth Amendment right to privacy. And I understand that. Like, I have that concern as well. But that concern is not, it has been interrogated extensively. Um, you know, it almost sounds fake as a stat, but there have been over 30 Fourth Amendment challenges to the use of our technology in court, in state court across the country, and in federal court. And all of them, every single one, every court, including just this week or last week in Norfolk, Virginia, in the Eastern District of Virginia, Federal District Court, the decision has been unambiguous. There is no Fourth Amendment right to privacy implications to the use of Flock cameras, because they are taking photographs of license plates on public roadways. And those license plates, they literally exist. They're required legally to be appended to the car to provide a link between that plate and the ownership of that car. The privacy interest that people talk about is literally, the truth is the opposite. It's required to be displayed, and these cameras aren't, they're not following people into their homes. They're taking photographs on public roadways. So I understand the concern, but that concern has been interrogated. It has been litigated, and the outcomes have been uniform.
It's important to check the facts. How is the community actually being impacted? who are communities voting for, and what kind of decisions are the leaders of that community making with that technology. Cool, Dan. Well, let's maybe we can finish off by talking about sort of the growth of Flock and really what's next for the company.
We're growing at a healthy pace. It's, the other thing that's really interesting about Flock is, our end user universally loves us. And the reason they do, people who are in charge of community safety, whether it be law enforcement or, the people who run homeowners associations or security for a large retail chain, the results they get from the use of the technology are unambiguous. And, in the law enforcement context, I love talking to chiefs of police. They all say, not all, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of them say the same thing, which is this is the most effective tool we have. It's the most effective tool we've ever had. And then they tell stories. They tell stories about kidnapped kids who get returned home within hours instead of days or never at all. And they talk about sex trafficking rings that get busted up, and women who get freed from literally lives of sexual slavery. It never ends. It's every day, and it's really, really gratifying. And so, we're going to continue to build tools. We're going to continue to make them better. And we're going to be mindful. I have the conversation all the time with my colleagues. There will come a time where, as the judge said in the Norfolk decision just last week, this technology could get ubiquitous enough and powerful enough that there needs to be a warrant requirement for its use, that it does have Fourth Amendment implications. That day in the future is out there. And when it comes, we'll build tools to enable that. It's just not yet. It's the power of the technology isn't there yet. And that's okay.
Yeah. Love to hear it. And then just in terms of the company, $7.5 billion valuation, just raised a Series F about a year ago. That is a lot of rounds. So is it, if I may ask, are you guys thinking about an exit?
Well, look, there's two sides to that coin. Anytime, we're very lucky that our investors have recognized tremendous value in what we're building, and we're very grateful. That I sound like I'm speaking the company line, and I sort of am, but it's also true.
Yeah.
That gives us the luxury of being able to say, "Gosh, there's a lot of private capital that's interested in supporting what we're building," and that means if an IPO is down the road, hopefully we'll be able to do it on our terms, meaning, when the company's ready and when the market's ready, or maybe not at all. It's one of those things where, at least for now, we've got a lot of options. And our goal is to just keep building great technology, keep helping make communities safer. And it's ham-handedly ties back to what we talked about before. Like, I think companies make a mistake when they focus too much on achieving an exit and not enough on doing a really good job at the reason they exist. If you do a really good job at the reason you exist, then your options are just legion. And if you take your eye off the ball and just go looking for the exit, well, that's pretty much the only path you're going to get, and it might not be as attractive as you hoped it would be when you get there.
Love it. Love it. Truly a central theme of this discussion, Dan.
Don't plan.
Really,
Don't plan.
really enjoyed speaking with you, and learned a lot. I guess I'll just open the floor to you. Any advice for the young lawyers these days graduating from law school?
Don't. This might be presumptuous, but don't listen too much to people like me. Like, I would hate it if I would truly hate it if there were some law student who is planning to go work at a big firm, and for some reason, something I said, the story about my colleague Mike, who didn't want to regretted selling his time, whatever, then went and changed their career path because they watched a podcast and somebody who doesn't know them or their situation gave them a piece of advice. Do your thing, work hard, do a great job. Be open to, that sounds so cliched, just be open to new challenges that aren't necessarily the ones that you thought you wanted to take on, and good things happen. I always tell my teams, worry about yourself. And I don't mean that as don't worry about other people. I mean, if you worry about yourself and the job you're doing and make sure you're doing as well as you can and showing up as well as you can for your colleagues and for your employer and also for your family, good things happen. You have more options. So yeah, that's my.
Appreciate
It's not a bumper sticker, but that's what I do.
appreciate the advice, Dan. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
All right, man. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me. This was a fun conversation.